It's like Thursday, they closed it Tuesday.
Excuse me. Thank you for being here this morning. We're going to go ahead and start the Minnehaha County Budget Overview and Hearings, and we will start with equalization. Crystal, good morning.
Good morning, Chris Lilly, Equalization. I guess I don't know what I'm supposed to be telling you. I've submitted our narratives and all of our paperwork. We've got some challenges in our office with coming on board and working to streamline and create some efficiencies and some different procedures how we handle and do our business and our job. And with that, I've identified some areas that we are in need of your help. I guess first and foremost, the one thing that we're requesting for 2020 budget that if I was going to prioritize right now would be a vehicle. With our staff, when the weather broke and all appraisers are out in the field, I've got one appraiser that's been scrambling to beg, steal, and borrow a vehicle from other departments, the commission department. I don't have enough vehicles to get everybody employed out in the field to do their job. So that is priority one for me, is to make sure that I can have everybody out measuring houses and doing what they're supposed to be doing, what they're hired to do. Priority two then is a staff shortage, and one person isn't going to fix our office what I think we need for the future, but it's a starting point. Right now we have 24 people in the office, or 23, 22, and then 14, 15 appraisers. The rest of them are support staff, clerical. They don't go out in the field. They manage the office, do all of our transfers and things like that. So with that, with the growing size of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County in general, as the parcel counts continue to grow, as the value continues to grow, what I've been told when I came down here is basically we don't have time to do reviews. All we have time to do is keep up with building permits. A little over 7,000 permits annually, divided that by 14 appraisers. I can agree with that to a little bit, but not to a whole extent, and that's where I'm looking at doing some revisions and some streamlining, some processes. I think we can do more. I know we can do more. The parcel count isn't there. The challenges they face is traveling, the construction. It might take them 45 minutes to get across town to go measure a house, things like that. Those are things that I'm not accustomed to where I came from. They are challenges. So there's some give and take there. I think we can do more than building permits with our current staff. We can start doing some reviews. It's just a matter of how do I get them there and how do we do that. But with that, if we're going to execute a review in a timeline, which I'm surprised Department of Revenue has let us go as long as they have, we're supposed to have a review cycle in place. And I've contacted Revenue to ask them how have we been signed off on every year, and they've signed off because we've been converting our parcels from AS400 to ProVal. They've considered that a review. They are reviewing them. They're looking at property cards, looking at our information from one program to the other, moving that data. That's not a review. A review is boots on the ground, going out, looking at properties that haven't had building permits issued to find out is there any changes made by the homeowners to improve the value or loss in value due to depreciation, due to flooding, due to foundations cracking, due to general wear and tear. We need to look at those as well. So we need to do that. With that, I would be anticipating an 8 to 10 year review cycle. That would mean every 8 to 10 years, every property in the county would get physically looked at. In order to do that, I need staff. And again, I'm going to throw out a stat, and I know I've been told and beat down, don't do that, but IAAO says that you should have about one employee per every 2,500 parcels. That's kind of a model they use worldwide for all jurisdictions. That being said, that appears that we need about 29 staff members in our office. We're sitting at 22 that are active, and myself, so we're a little bit light. And again, it's a measure. It's not anything to be adhered to, and I realize that. Some counties, it doesn't mean we can't do our job if we have less. It just means we're not as efficient as we could be. So it's just one of those things I threw out there to support my request. Again, one person isn't going to make or break, but it's a start. And there's a 2-year train-up time, probably first year to become certified. So it's an ongoing. So in my long-range plan, I projected asking for one person annually every year until we can get to where between our processes of streamlining the office, creating some efficiencies, some procedures, an addition of a staff, 2-3 people, when all of that meshes together, hopefully we're fully vested and maximally proficient in our job. So that would be priority 2. But with another person, then also comes another vehicle, if we're allowed that, because then I can't get a vehicle to cover my current shortage. And then if we hire another one, then I'm still a vehicle short. So again, prioritizing vehicle first, then a staff, but with that comes another vehicle. Thirdly, in my major request is to replace a vehicle, a 2002 Blazer. I've submitted the maintenance log on that. I mean, it's an older vehicle. We've had some issues. We're going to have issues. And at what point do we continue to put money into a vehicle? I mean, if I got to put a $500 brake job into the vehicle that's worth $500, do we want to do that? I'm going to kick that back to you. I'm just throwing it out there. We're using it. We're driving it. It drives down the road. But is it worth it to keep it? I don't know. So any money we have to put into it is money lost. So not a major priority, but a look at a potential. So
Are there questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Barth.
Chris, I really appreciate the work you're doing. But is it possible, I've heard that your staff goes out for half a day and then spends half a day in the office. Could you alternate using the same vehicle with half the staff?
it's yes and no. For the most part, I don't want to micromanage them because 14 different schedules, 14 different, commercial. They don't have as many parcels, but they're more in depth. It's hit and miss. I kind of leave that up to the appraisers. They have their parcels they need to get to. I can look at some of that. I don't know that it would work so well. There's so many variables to that. I mean, Dean and I had talked about that, and we'd considered that. When the weather's nice, they're going. If we get 5 days of rain, I'm not going to have them out walking through the mud, measuring in houses. That's their days to do their paperwork, to get caught up, to do their data entry. So when that weather breaks again, do I want to tell half of my staff, sorry, you got to stay in this morning and you got to go out this afternoon? When it's going, if you come up in my office on a nice day, there's me and the deputy and my clerks. There's nobody in. They are generally out from probably 9 in the morning till 4:30. Maybe coming back in or out depending on what they've got to go, what they've got to do, or what their personal life, if they've got other appointments or things they have to do. There's not one thing that's consistent with that. So there might be the perception of that, but I don't think that's the reality.
Madam Chair. I'm sorry, Dean. So have you put in your budget, for, if you are going to get an additional employee, have you put in for computers and
Yeah, that's
furniture?
that's in my budget plan there. Yep,
Commissioner Karski.
14 appraisers. How many vehicles do you have currently?
13.
13? Okay.
So Chris, I know you weren't able to be here on Tuesday. I
Yeah.
don't know if you had a chance to listen to the presentation. I know your deputy was here.
Yep.
Just so you understand that, we've got a really challenging, which is kind of an
It is every year.
ongoing mantra around here. It's a song we seem to sing every year. But so, our growth and our CPI is pretty much eaten up before we get to a single
Right.
position. So
Right.
we've got some hard choices we got to
Yeah,
make.
well, you're
coming
not
up.
going to hurt my feelings. This is the time to say what I think we need to do the best job that we can. Can we get by? If we get nothing, we're going to continue to do it. And we'll struggle, and every year that we get chopped out, it becomes more of a struggle. But everybody does what they do. You pull up your boots and go to work. So, only asking, hoping, but you're not going to hurt my feelings if I don't get anything. I understand the struggles and the growth and the crime and things like that. Kyle did relay to me a little bit, and I'm sorry I couldn't be here. I had to meet with Maggie to discuss some abatements that are pretty complicated. So that was already scheduled. So
Okay. Any further questions?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next presentation is on facilities. Mark Krenz. Good morning.
Morning, Commission. Mark Krenz, Facilities Department. We currently have a unfilled maintenance worker position on our payroll. This position was one of the two maintenance workers that JDC had when we took over the building. We absorbed that workload and held on to one of these positions with the anticipation of the new jail coming online. We'll be needing another staff. So when I, excuse me, look at trade data and workload, our HVAC side of things is where we're coming up short, and with the additional properties we're taking on, and now with the new jail coming online, we're gonna be falling even a little bit further behind. Currently from 2017 up to date, we're putting in about 60 hours a week in the current jail and almost 50 hours a week on the HVAC side. So with additional staff member, we'll be able to cover a lot more of the HVAC load that we have, and also we'll be able to keep continuing doing these upgrades and efficiencies and everything to keep saving costs. So I'm requesting to eliminate the unfilled maintenance worker position and replace it with a senior building maintenance technician. Are there any questions for me?
Questions for Mark?
If I may,
Yeah, Commissioner Karski.
what's the difference between the two, in work and pay, et cetera?
Yeah, both. So the senior tech is basically a certified trained HVAC technician. Maintenance worker would be your general laborer.
Okay, okay.
So and maybe I misunderstood your question, but when I'm looking at your staffing requests that you had in the 2019 budget, this position at a grade 16 and 45,000. So the cost of this position is not a cost of a whole new position. It is the cost of a
Yeah.
whole new position. Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
The maintenance worker is unbudgeted,
Okay,
unfunded.
unfunded.
Sorry.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner
So,
Boyd.
Mark, as we're faced with trying to stuff 400 lawyers into a phone booth, what would it take to work in the public safety building, work in the old jail over here, work in the basement of the museum to find more room for people? Do you have any ideas on what those operations might cost? We've been kind of waiting to liquidate some of our real estate, but that's not happening as fast as the growth in our staff, and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
As far as the extension goes, it wouldn't take a whole lot. There is some office space available that has power and data currently if we're looking for a few spots. Public safety building, that'd take a little bit more work, you know. We'd put some wiring and some data, some lighting in there, maybe a few walls, but I mean, there are some options for low cost if it's just temporary.
Other questions? Commissioner Benica.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I've been fortunate enough to be his liaison for multiple years. And not only has the concept of what we're doing on the campus changed, but he has taken on more functions internally rather than sending them out for contractual contracts on an outside agency or an outside service kind of thing. So there's some differences in janitorial, but from a facility standpoint and being able to keep up with all the things that we've grown in our campus, we're doing that internally rather than externally now, and we have been fortunate to have that leadership, but more importantly, been able to handle that without more growth.
I'm sure I have one more.
Commissioner Barth.
Here. Mark, I know that you've had more to do with things out at the fairgrounds. Does your staff do HVAC and stuff out there?
We have that in the contract. So that's another one of our workloads that we're doing all the HVAC maintenance and service on that equipment out there, so.
And when you took it over, none of it was working, I don't think, but that's just my perception. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, that takes us to the Public Defender's Office. Tracy Smith, good morning.
Good morning, Tracy Smith and Mike Miller, Minnehaha County Public Defender's Office.
I will just add, you do have this on your left, on your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
on
It's
your-
on Dropbox under the today's commission, or today's budget hearing.
You wanted the PowerPoint? Um, Thanks. So our goals for the 2020 budget that we would like to address are significant challenges that we have right now is essentially improving case processing and reducing overrepresentation of our clientele in the Minnehaha County Jail. To that end, what we're seeking to do is ask in coordination with Carrie Benz in the Alliance program is to actually ask for a caseworker within her department. And we're also asking for a full-time legal office assistant as well as a part-time legal office assistant. And our goal is, and our mantra at this point in time is, in order to improve efficiencies, we have to have the right people performing the right job functions. What we see as being the impact of these additional staffing is helping clients who are with mental health crises or drug abuse disorders, responding to them earlier at the beginning of their cases, increased efficiencies by identifying conflicts early on in their cases, reducing turnover. As you'll see from the next slide, we've had a significant increase in turnover, which is very expensive for staff with supervision and training. We'd like to address that earlier on with the additional administrative staff. Having the right people performing the right duties within the office will allow for more time for the attorneys and the paralegals to focus on the legal matters. It'll also reduce costs to the county by allowing us to have less requests for delays, by allowing paralegals to work on the cases for the attorneys, so that they're not asking for as many delays, motions to delay, so that they can work on their cases and hopefully resolve cases either through pleas, sentencings, or jury trials. And it also is important because it'll also help with the state's attorney's office because it reduces, with the effective resolution of cases, they're restoring victims more efficient, concerns more efficiently as well. Our goal is also to improve collaboration between all of our departments with more effective use of community partnerships by having this additional staffing. As I just touched on, and it's already in the information that you have, with the separations that we've had in our department, we've had 23% turnover in 2018, which is higher. Our request this year, I think it's one of the first years since I've been here that I haven't actually asked for attorneys. And that is based on the request from our staff. We did have a difficult time maintaining attorneys and a difficult time recruiting for attorneys. And I think what Mike and I would like to do is focus on having the right people performing the right duties. Attorneys need to be doing legal work, paralegals need to be doing paralegal work, and we need to have Alliance, our alternative sentencing worker, doing the work that they're properly trained to do. I can speak anecdotally to one particular situation that I had not too long ago where we had a judge order a mental health assessment for one of our clients, and she was sentenced. And she was, special circumstances that made it very difficult for her to function in the community, which is why the judge probably ordered this mental health assessment. And she contacted her attorney, the case is completely over with, and said this local hospital is not letting her set up this appointment to connect her with services in the community unless she's referred by somebody else. So the attorney just made the phone call for the client to help her schedule the appointment. So now my staff and I, and Carol, I've been talking to her as well, I've been dealing for months with a bill from the local hospital because somehow they think that because we helped this lower functioning client with scheduling the appointment, it's now our responsibility. Where if we had just probably told the client, there are other community agencies that can help you with that, it would have taken up less time for us. So we're slowly learning lessons that we need to have the right people performing the right duties.
In 2018, we had 161 clients that we referred to the Alternative Sentencing Worker Program. Southeastern Behavioral did 107 evaluations. Of those 161 clients that were referred, 22 of them became clients of Southeastern, stayed with them, were connected with services, and were given the services they need to be successful. Those 161 clients were referred to the Alternative Sentencing Worker Program, actually only made up 1.9% of our clients from 2018. And this is a pretty low percentage, even though we have a good result with outcome. So adding this caseworker position will help us increase the number of people who need these services that we're able to actually get connected. So we've had good outcomes from having this Alternative Sentencing Worker Program, but we're short staffing. We need some additional help to be able to utilize it to its fullest benefit and get the most people connected that need to be connected. As of June 1st this year, we've opened 3,518 cases. Of those, 13 plus % are people that are homeless. So 13 plus % are people that need some kind of services, whether it's housing, employment services, mental health, medical services. And when you compare that to 2018, where we were only able to refer 1.9% of our clients to the alternative sentencing worker, there are a lot of clients that would really benefit and do well if we were able to refer more of our people to that program. The caseworker position would help us be able to get some of these additional duties done and then leave the alternative sentencing worker to do some of the things that they're more meant to do. The next two slides are slides that we have shown in the past. Slide 7 is a snapshot of a week of a misdemeanor attorney's calendar. Slide 8 is a snapshot of a week of a felony attorney's calendar. We just show that, as Tracy was saying, these other things that we aren't trained and qualified to do, we also don't have time to do them. And so having a correct staff who knows how to do them, is trained to do them, and has the time to do them is a big benefit.
The next slide is essentially, as was contained in our annual report, it just shows that our felony caseload has increased over the last 5 years, 104%. Our mental illness, alcohol commitments have increased 422%, and the overall caseload of our attorneys has increased 36%. That's why it's even more important that we have the right people performing the right duties. If the attorneys have more time to focus on the legal aspects of their case, and we have the paralegals focusing on the work they were trained to do, our administrative staff being able to answer phone calls, address the liens, getting over to the auditor's office quickly, and working with Alliance and our other community programs, we hope that we can be most efficient and saving money for the county by trying to resolve cases, by not trying to have the attorneys being the ones who are constantly trying to do everything they can for the clients. And this is a way that we're hoping to do it by adding the additional administrative staff and asking to ask for the caseworker specifically to work with our clients. The next slide also is contained in our annual report, which also shows the break load of our caseload over the last 10 years. And I don't think anyone's arguing that our caseload has gone down or anticipating that it will go down.
The next slide shows the breakdown in percentages of the county's indigent defense costs versus the county's indigent defense workload. While the private attorneys who are appointed are only handling 10% of the indigent defense caseload, they eat up about 23% of the funding. Public Defender's Office is responsible for 74% of the casework, and we are able to do that with 59% of the funding, which shows that we try to be as efficient as possible and as good a stewards of the tax money as we can be.
I think it's already been said that statistical information versus need versus growth isn't always the best information to present in as far as showing what it is that we should have, but it is important that based on national standards, when you're looking at where we should be and what the recommended is based on the ABA and the NLADA, this is a comparison of showing what we have seen over the last 10 years. The red line there shows what our attorney growth has been. Our request for, despite the county being in a difficult time right now, us saying that we need a legal office assistant and part-time help for a legal office assistant and a request for a case manager position for Alliance is our attempt to show that we recognize the situation that the county is right now, and we're willing to work to try to be as most efficient as we can, but these are not positions that we are making light of or asking, just they're very important for our office.
And the last slide, I think we've kind of shown before, the success of the alternative courts that we have here, drug court, DWI court, veterans court. They see great success over just people going through the regular court system, great success versus the amount of resources that they actually take. We have attorneys that participate in that, and I think that shows also our part of our office helping to be part of the solution to try to fight the problem of recidivism.
Are there any questions for us?
Questions? Commissioner Barth.
Tracy, do you have room for more people?
We do. The reason for our request for legal office assistance is because that's what we have room for right now. We do not have any additional office space. Our request for the Alliance caseworker would be housed. I have visited with Ms. Benz, and the intent would be it would be under the supervision, and they do have space in their department.
And the other two, you have room for them?
Just the legal office assistants, yes.
Other questions? Commissioner Karski.
Just comment more than a question. I've been on the Public Defenders Board, Advisory Board now for 2.5 years, and I appreciate Tracy coming to us with this request because in my own personal business with my staff, I tell my salespeople I don't want them doing customer service work. In Tracy's office, it doesn't make sense to have attorneys doing legal assistant or admin type work. We need people doing the right jobs, and I can appreciate this request, and I am supportive of it.
Anyone else? Commissioner Benninga.
I'm sure this is kind of hard to evaluate at this point, but do you see any effect of the triage center being able to divert clients to the right place at the right time up front rather than halfway through the system?
Hopefully. It should work, hopefully, kind of like the mobile crisis response team and those kind of things where they divert people to the services they need before they get to the courthouse, before they get arrested, and hopefully save money in that way.
I agree. I do a lot of the mental health commitments with the 422% increase in mental commitments over the last 5 years. what I do see is a lot of people who are using the mental health commitment process as a way to stay on their medications. And I do see some people who have been out in Pennington County who are using the behavioral health system as a way to get medications because they think our system is a lot like what they have out in Pennington County. And I do think once we have that, we'll save a lot of money by not having as many mental commitments.
Other questions? Commissioner Heiberger.
Just a comment. I don't know that it's a question. I don't know if we want to go down this road, but I know last year we had conversation about professional services and the amount of money that you guys put in that and the amount of money that you spend, and that the average person could never afford some of the professional services that you guys have. And I still think that that needs to be a question on the table, whether it makes sense for us to put $270,000 in professional services and fly people in from all over the United States. And we don't maybe need to have that conversation now, but I do find that as a concern because that could help to find a person. So I think it's a lot of money.
I think with our expert expenses, a lot depends on the number of homicide cases. And they are ordered by the court, and they have to be approved. We do look for local resources, the best that we can for what's in the area. The only time we look for out of the area is when there isn't somebody locally available.
And I do think with you being on the Mental Health Oversight Council with me, Commissioner, you're aware of the shortage of some kind of experts and doctors and things in our state.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. That takes us to Human Services. Kari Benz, good morning.
Okay, so mine can be a little bit shorter because I think Tracy and Mike did a good job of talking about the position for Alliance. I guess if you want me to field any questions, I can sure do that. I think that Alliance has spoken for itself. I think the stats are showing that when people have effective case management, the likelihood that they are those that have high recidivism rates, it does decrease that. And I would agree with Tracy. I know in our office, we have really tried to realign people to more efficiently perform their job, and we have people streamlining things so that they are doing the work that they were set to do. And so I think that it has really helped us as a whole when we look at how our department interfaces with many other departments, which kind of is a good segue, if I can, into the request that I have for taking a part-time position, a clerical position, and turning it into a full-time position. Our office does interfaces with a lot of other departments, doing a lot of clerical work and management of those responsibilities. It basically would be taking the monies that we have in our budget currently for the part-time staff and putting that towards the full-time position. So albeit it would be a quote new position, part of that funding would already be offset with what we have in the budget currently. I think one of the biggest pieces is that we have had no staff, excuse me, changes in our clerical staffing since 2010. That was the last time that we hired staff. Over the course of that time, we've seen a significant increase in the involuntary mental health holds, as you've heard repeatedly throughout many reports from staff. And we manage that database. We manage all the incoming paperwork for Jim Oste. And so that definitely affects our office. We did have the resignation of a HAB person, the Homeless Advisory Board coordinator. And so we have kind of assumed some of those responsibilities as well, primarily the Pass It On or the Bus Pass program. And so we now manage that out of our office, and our front desk staff have lovingly taken that on. And that's a bit of a challenge in and of itself. Avira has increased the number of their paperwork, the numbers that they refer, and we get a number of NOAs. And we currently, obviously, as you all know, are in litigation with Avira. There's quite a number of cases going before court in a short period of time here coming up in July.
Carrie, can you explain what an NOA is?
sorry, NOH, our notice of hospitalization. So when anybody ever comes to the hospitals and whether they show up in the ER and they're only seen in the ER, or they're actually admitted to the hospital and they have no insurance, we get notified of that. And so the hospital is almost applying for that person on behalf of that person for county assistance.
Thank you.
Excuse me, the ability to have another front desk or more time in the front desk would allow us to better develop, excuse me, I'm probably gonna have to end this off. To better develop a database. For a case manager, we actually have now redesigned a case management position that is gonna be doing more homeless and housing placement with people. And so we're working with the city actually to better develop and streamline a process in regards to assisting people getting housed faster and more quickly, then also receiving case management services. So this front desk, thank you so much. This front desk person would help us manage that database in conjunction with the city. We also have a concern for safety. Our building really, quite honestly, is very open to the public, as it should be. However, we also know that having one person up front to manage the amount of traffic that we have is incredibly difficult. Certainly knowing that the individuals that we serve over the course of time has become incredibly complex. We have not only continued to provide the emergency services that we are statutorily obligated to provide, but we also now have increased with our Synergy program, which is our homeless families, and obviously then our jail reentry program of Alliance. So our numbers have increased significantly, and we've done some time studies, and I think that's been the most convincing piece for us, is that in doing the time studies, 20% of our time, of our current staff's time, is spent doing work for other departments in the county. And so while we certainly want to be a team player, it is kind of a game and it's a shuffle to try to meet those needs as well. So by having this additional time, it allows us to continue to provide that support to other departments in the county. And we really enjoy interfacing with other departments. It's a way for us to do collaboration. I think the position that Tracy and Mike talked about is exactly that. It's a way to collaborate, streamline, and better serve our community while also conserving funds, which is, I think, what we're all here to do. Obviously, our population isn't going to decrease. We know that Minnehaha County is growing, the needs change and evolve, and I think that the county has done a good job overall of being a chameleon. We do what we need to do to meet the need of people, and this is one way that we can do that. When we collaborate in amongst our departments, it just seems like that's a better way to meet the needs of people. We streamline paperwork, and we make it more efficient. I think that's all I have, so I can sure answer questions regardless of whether it's for this position or the Alliance position, if you'd like. And I
Commissioner
don't know,
Heiberger.
Lori's here too, if you have questions. Lori is actually, for the assistant director, is actually the direct supervisor for this team of people for the front desk and did the time study. So if you have questions about that, she can sure answer those questions.
Commissioner Heiberger.
This maybe we should have gone to Tracy, but I'll address it to you, Carrie, since you and I talked about it the other day, and that was that position that Southeast Behavioral had in the Public Defender's Office is no longer there. We kind of talked about some of the reasons. No, am I wrong?
It's
Yeah.
still there.
And so, it's
Still
still
there,
there?
right?
Oh, okay. I thought that person had left, and that was part of the reason for the
I don't
Alliance
know if
person,
you
so I misspoke,
Talk
and
that better than myself.
I thought that that person had left, and that was why this was kind of filling that hole.
Nope, they haven't. What happened, I think, is the way we understand it, there have been some shortages of staff in Southeastern, and so they have redirected some of their employees. And so the position is still there. The alternative sentencing worker is still working with our clients, but a larger portion of their time now has been used doing things at Southeastern. It's our understanding that they've filled those vacant positions and are training those new staff so that the alternative sentencing worker will be going back to what the original time allotment and duties were.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I appreciate the clarification.
Mike, before you leave, I'm curious, do you have a time frame? Is there a time frame as to when that, you expect that to happen?
I think actually starting this week.
Oh,
Wonderful.
fantastic.
We met with her and spoke to her on Tuesday, and so my understanding is the training is done and she's starting this week back in her office as she was.
Thanks, Mike. Sorry, Carrie, for jumping in with a question
No,
that.
that's okay.
That's a good
That's great.
question. I had that same understanding.
I
so.
think probably one of the things that we probably should clarify is that, and Tracy and Mike might be able to better attest to this than myself. I think that the alternative sentencing position was designed to do more of the mental health assessments and be writing reports that are helpful to the attorneys and the judges, not meant to do the case management piece, so the placement piece of connecting to services and those type of things. So I think that's where the difference would be. They're shaking their heads, so I
Yeah,
think I'm
they
right.
are.
I think it's really two different positions. The beauty of it is obviously Southeastern is providing that service at no charge, which is amazing. And so it certainly isn't that we would want to impede or be duplicative in any fashion, but I think that worker is meant to do a completely different job and role than what a case manager is. So that's just kind of the difference.
Commissioner Benninga?
Carrie, I'm having difficulty, not just yours, but in other budget presentations. When I look at the overtime on some of the line items from 2018, for example, yours shows $77.75 in overtime, and I obviously know that you guys do comp time related also, but that's not hardly any overtime.
We try to do no overtime. Our overtime primarily comes from, we are on call after 5. And so that any call that we get through the helpline and our on-call person receives on a Friday, it's just time that they can't flex out. And so that's really primarily where that comes from. Other than that, if we have anybody that works past that 8 to 5 or past that 40 hours during the week, Lori can attest to the fact that we kind of go crazy because it's usually trying to rob one program to cover something else, because we usually run short. By Friday, we're pretty scarce in number, because we do try to get people to flex out their time so that we don't incur that overtime cost.
There is a work and need ratio of how much overtime you can afford to do before you hire someone else. And generally speaking, $77 in overtime would not make much sense to hire someone else for a long time.
It's a-
And I
Sorry.
frankly had probably that much overtime this morning before I came to work. No, my staff.
I think our challenge is that the bulk of our staff that end up with flex time is really going to be our frontline staff in regards to the case management piece. Those are usually the ones that we run with overtime. It's not so much the front desk time that we have in overtime. We could certainly pay that person overtime, but I think it's gotten to the point where it's past an occasional. We're pretty much, we need somebody full-time to be able to cover all of the responsibilities that we have for our office, and the increasing number of requests we have there, as well as trying to cover for other departments.
So do
So-
we keep track of comp time?
Lori has the records, yep. We try to keep track of the amount of flex time that we use and how much time overages that we would otherwise have. We could sure get that information and try to track that for you, if that would be helpful.
Is there a way for us to get that information? I know it's not a budget item, but
There are comp time records for each employee.
I would love to see that.
Thank you. Commissioner Barth and then Commissioner Karski.
So in the proposed budget, are we still funding the HAB director position, or are we leaving it vacant and leaving the funding in there? Is that what we're doing?
The
or-
funding has remained in there, correct? We've
Okay.
left that funding in there. And that report that the study that we incorporated as the plan, that should be being completed. We'll be having a meeting with the Augie Research in the next couple of weeks. And so we'll be able to review that and find out what we need to do with that. That team, I'm sure, will have recommendations as to whether we continue to fund that position or whether it gets repurposed.
Commissioner Karski.
Tracy, Carrie, for the 2 years I served as your liaison, we had ongoing discussions about the cost of burials to the county with the local funeral homes. We're bumping that portion of the budget up by 10% this year. It's $20,000. Now, I know nationally the trend for disposition of remains has been greater and greater towards cremation versus burial. Are we following that same trend line? Do you know?
Yes.
And I know there's also, I believe, a state statute that is very specific that we cannot do cremation unless it's specifically approved, or
We primarily do, the bulk of the funerals that we provide assistance for are cremations. It is the family's choice or the person that's making that application for the deceased in regards to whether they would have a traditional or a cremation. So the bulk of ours really are cremation. I think it's always, it really is playing darts when it comes to being able to predict how many funerals we'll have. We usually base that on the growth. We usually take trends and try to look at the general growth of the population. But overall, yes, we do the bulk of the cremations. When it comes to unclaimed bodies, that's where no one is stepping forward to take responsibility. Then our office steps forward, we take responsibility, and those funerals are always cremations, and typically then the burial ends up at the county cemetery.
Other questions? So, Carrie, I'm curious whether you have any positions right now that you think could be repurposed or somehow be used to help satisfy some of the caseworker responsibilities?
Excuse me. We actually have been working on that with our redesign of having a different, one of the caseworker positions redesigned to be the housing navigator position. We actually have that staff person that took that position was actually involved with the Synergy, the homeless family program. Our ability to repurpose that position is there. If the need was there and we felt that that would be the best use of that staff, I would willingly to have that request removed. I do want to note that we feel that the position is important, so we don't want to necessarily pull that request, but if it was felt that that was the best thing for us to do and repurpose that position to align with this position that we're asking for, that would assist the public defender's office, I'd be willing to do that and remove that request so that we could, other departments would have the opportunity to have a hire.
Commissioner Karski.
along that same line of question then is private organizations like the Bishop Dudley Hospitality House, are they performing a lot of the same work? I mean, would that, no?
No.
Okay.
We've actually recently learned that the Bishop Dudley Hospitality House has identified that there is a maximum length of stay now. So they cap out at 120 days of stay. That's lifetime. That's not just like a one-time stay and then they can leave and come back. It's a one-time, lifetime stay. So we are encountering some struggles with that. We've certainly started to set up meetings to meet with the city and Bishop Dudley to try to address that and make a plan. The services that they provide, they certainly try to do some basic case management, I believe, for the individuals. The families, I believe that position is kind of like more of a resource person. So they provide resources and a list of options to families. But typically, the families end up on our doorstep and receive the case management then.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Just a comment about the Bishop Dudley recent decision, and Carrie and I talked about it briefly yesterday. But this is a concern to us because if you had somebody that spent, their 100 days last year because it was too cold in the shelter, they got 20 days left for this coming winter, and then where are they going to go? It didn't used to be that way. I can maybe see some of their concern if they've got somebody that just says, I'm going to spend my whole winter at Bishop Dudley every single year, and their goal would probably be to get people in housing, permanently. But this is a huge issue I'm glad we're dealing with it now instead of November 1st and finding out a lot of people no longer have a place to go.
Right.
So,
They did identify that they would be willing to look at their cold days and make some exceptions. So if it's cold enough, they would allow someone to stay. Their cold enough is beyond cold. So 32 degrees is freezing, and it has to be colder than that. So I don't know that that's the answer myself.
Any other questions?
I'll just make
Commissioner
one more
Herrera.
comment, and that is with the money that's coming down from the Safety and Justice Challenge, one of the positions that they're looking at that hasn't been approved through that funding yet is to put another person in the Alliance. And granted, that is not to do the type of work that these guys are talking about. And I'm not exactly sure what the scope is. Dean might know better, but it has to do with between the triage center and
Right.
and placement more so. But I'm just thinking with one more body helping in that way too, that maybe it'll make everything flow a little better. I don't know that because that position hasn't completely been put together yet.
Just,
Commissioner
this
Percy.
is kind of a strange question, I know, but just concern nationally, Medicaid funding, closing of nursing homes. How long has it been since the county's had a county nursing home, a county-owned?
Oh my, a really long time. You know, the county used to have a county physician and a county nurse. That was well beyond or before my time. I think Hugh Grogan would be the person to ask that question, and he could teach you lots of things and talk for hours. However, I think probably one of our biggest concerns is that we're going to end up with a group of elderly that are not going to have anywhere to go.
That's my point.
Mhm. And, you know, the county, as far as our statutorily obligation, that's something we're really going to have to revisit, because what do we do with those individuals? Placement is going to be a concern. It's a growing concern because there's fewer and fewer placements to go. We've noticed that even with the homeless population, the population is getting older, and it's incredibly difficult to find placement just because they are multifaceted and come with so many issues.
Not only did we have a county nursing home, we had a county poor farm, and
We did.
that's. Mhm.
Mhm.
Lots of challenges. So thank you very much. And are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to JDC, Jamie Gravitt. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Jamie Gravitt, JDC. I'm coming before you today asking for one position and to replace a vehicle. The position that I'm seeking to obtain this next year is a position that we previously had and gave up in a time of budget needs. I understand it's a very tight year this year. We currently spread the training through 2 administrative staff and then several supervisors. Our training that we provide is well needed, and we think we do a very good job of it, but we think we can do a better job of it having this training coordinator. Governing Magazine just cited that there's a 64% decline in job applicants in corrections over the past few years, and part of it is because of inadequate training that professionals are receiving. One of their recommendations is having this field training officer to orient new staff, as well as working with local colleges to try and get some of that training provided through their coursework early in their college career, and then hiring those people to get on-the-job training and hopefully move them back in. We don't have those official connections with the colleges, but we're working very hard right now to hire part-time staff and have them trained and moved in, and it's important for us to have well-trained staff. Just yesterday, there was a news article that came out from Newswatch South Dakota about abuses that are happening at the Aurora Plains Academy, and one of the major things that they cited was poor, inadequate continued training. And you know, we need this. We're also ramping up for a mandate that's going to be coming from the federal government. In the 2018 OJJDP bill that passed, one of the requirements that they're going to be bringing forward is that We're not gonna be allowed to use confinement for violent acts in our building any longer than it takes the youth to calm down. So, along with that is gonna be coming a ton of training on, conflict resolution and those types of courses, and so I wanna ramp up and be prepared for that. This is similar to mandates that they had in the past where we know it's coming because it's following the pattern. It's when youth weren't held in jails anymore. It's when chins couldn't be held in secure detention, and now it's people can't be held in confinement past the time that they calm down. So we're gonna have a lot of training issues that we need for our existing staff, as well as maintaining professional training to orientate our new staff. I understand that if I can't get this position this year, because there's more important positions that need to be immediately filled, but I'll be coming back to you again next year with it if I can't get it this year, because it's gonna be that important going into the next 3 to 4 years. The vehicle and as far as your question, Jeff, I do have space. I don't need any more computers. I just need the staff and to put uniforms on them, so. As far as the vehicle goes, I'm asking to replace a 2008 Dodge Durango. I've worked with DJ to try and acquire one of his vehicles, and that's the information that I provided to you. The current vehicle is severely rusted out. I'm worried about the safety, integrity of the body on it if we were to be in an unfortunate accident, and especially if it's while we're transporting youth. I have a need for a four-wheel drive all the time because being a 24/7 agency, when I have staff that call in sick in the middle of a blizzard, we need to find a way to get out and get to them and get them in. As well as I need a larger vehicle to do multiple transports at once to reduce the people I'm pulling off our floor to do those transports. So the vehicle that I'm asking for, DJ paid $58,000 for 2 years ago. Blue Book value now is $30,000. I need to put a $4,000 radio in it because the radios that we buy now have to be compliant with the changes that are coming in 2023. So they're kind of sticking it to us now. So those are my major requests.
Questions, Commissioner Benega?
I'm just gonna make a couple of comments, and Jamie and I talked last night about some of the things that we had talked about previously, and he's been very flexible, but part of the issue with the mandates is we don't know to what extent those are gonna be, so it's gonna be significant, we're pretty confident of, but more importantly, these individuals that we're now serving in JDC are a whole different clientele than we had a couple, 3 years ago. And if you look at what they're being charged with and where the court system is taking them, in some cases to adult court, that's a big issue. So being able to train staff to make that transition is gonna be important. I have looked at the vehicle that he has transporting people with, and I'm not sure that most of us would take it home because we may not get back with it. It is a piece of junk, to be honest. So we don't have much choice on that one.
So in a way, basically, I'm asking for you to allow DJ to buy a vehicle, and then I get,
He's a great funding source.
yeah, and then I would get his old vehicle. And if that was approved, he said that we'd be able to get the vehicle immediately and then make the payment come January 1st.
My analogy is if we put a $4,000 radio in that vehicle that he currently has, we just increase the value by $3,000.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Barth?
So these federal mandates are always difficult, and I can't imagine how you can solve that problem. But what about could that person start partway into the year as opposed to January 1st? I mean, what if they came on board at the end of the school year in June or something?
Oh, I'm very open to that. That'd be great. Like I said, we're ramping up to be prepared for this.
Yeah.
This summer, I'm sending 2 people once a month to Pier for 4 months. They're gonna be training them on a new behavior management program that the state is providing to all the detention centers. We're also gonna, we're gonna need this coordinator is also a backup supervisor. They're a supervisory level position. Currently, when we have supervisors that call in sick, it's difficult to pull other supervisors. We're Rob and Peter to pay Paul. You bring up overtime. There was a period last year where I had a supervisor quit, another one that had maternity leave or paternity leave, and and we were down a staff. So we were constantly robbing shifts to maintain minimum levels to keep kids out of their rooms and maintain ratios. So I mean, it's a multifaceted position that we're asking for, but yeah, definitely, if you can give me half a year, I'd take that in a heartbeat.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That takes us to the treasurer's office. Pam Nelson, good morning.
Morning. Overall, I didn't ask for an increase in my budget, and generally speaking, I don't do that. I try to maintain things the way they are with not increasing that budget. Well, let's go back. My experience that I bring to the table is I've been involved for 45 years in an elected position at a local, state, and a national level. I've also participated in all the national associations that have been affiliated with those particular organizations. So I have the advantage of having contacts in just about any state and dealing with just about any subject. So I have valuable resources out there that I rely on a regular basis to help me make decisions about things that I do and shouldn't be doing or should be doing. And so that experience also would indicate that I have been very fiscally conservative in terms of budgeting and the money and resources that I ask for. I only ask for what I think we need. I'm going to try to justify those requests today, but in the end, the ball's in your court. You can decide how much and what priority you want to give those requests. We are asking for an additional 3 staff people in our office. Those people would be involved in 2 of those people would be used to fill in at the window when people are on breaks, lunch, or vacation. And they would also be used to help us do some back office stuff when they're not filling in at the window. That would also enable our one phone person to spend more time on the phone and less time at the window, because right now we see the need for when people are in line, we need to take care of those people. You can always call me back later. So those are the things that we want our people to do, and I think that in our office, we're pretty efficient. Just when we managed to get, when I came, the waiting time in my office was around from 1.5 to 2.5 hours, and we're now down to 15 minutes or less. But in order to do that, we need to have 12 windows going at all times. And we are doing that right now by taking at least 4 people several hours a day away from their regular jobs, and one of those persons would be the phone person. So we need to change that, and we need to still maintain that probably 15 minutes or less. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to expect people to do that. Some people, quite frankly, don't have any choices because they don't have, the business that they're trying to conduct can't be done at a self-serve kiosk or something like that. Generally speaking, the workload in our office is impacted to a significant extent by decisions being made by lots of other people. For example, right now we're dealing with 2 post office mailing box services were closed down. One was in Moody County and one was in Pennington County. When they don't have those resources, we're their resource. When the state's busy, they're clearly telling people, call your county, they can help you. And so if you can't get what you need from the state, you'll call us. And I don't know how there's anything that we can really do about that. If you look at other decisions that have been made down the line, the state just transferred all the title work that dealers used to do and that the state used to do to the treasurer's office. So now we're responsible for all of that. If you look at the population, it's grown about 30% since 2000. If you look at the staffing level in my office, when I went there in 2005, I started actually in November of 2004, but the staffing level then was 20 people, and we now have 23 people. And we're serving significantly more people, doing significantly more things than we did in the past, and those are the reasons that we need the additional staff people in our office. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and our fate is in your hands.
Questions? Commissioner Barth?
Pam, thanks for coming. I usually go through the line just to see what it's like, and I've got to say that even when the line's down to the pillar, it only takes 15 minutes to
Right, Jeff.
get through the line. I appreciate that. The other day, we had a bit of a disaster happening, but the kiosks were down. Piers, computer systems weren't working. What about if you have more people, do you have room for them?
Yep.
We're going to share your office with somebody? I mean,
No, I think we just managed to keep 12 windows rolling at all times. And we do have some spaces there that we use. The title companies use some of our space to do their work. We have an agreement. They don't charge us for stuff, and we don't charge them. That was in place before I came, and I think it's probably in the county's best interest to do that.
Would you have room for another window? I don't know if there's a spot
Don't
in that hallway.
Well, we pull people in, but we need to keep the windows that we have full. And when you have somebody that's going, we have 2 or 3 people who are gone all the time because somebody's on break or somebody's at lunch. And so just keeping that going. And then we also have vacations and PTO, so those things we have to adequately address as well.
Well, I think clearly there's a few days a month where the majority of time delays happen. It's not every Wednesday morning. It's the 28th of February and that kind of stuff where people come in at the last second to take care of things.
Well, at the beginning of the month and the end of the month on Mondays and Fridays, they're always the busier times, but it's pretty steady. And we've had some recent things happen that made that worse. One of the things was the state sent out all the renewal cards for June with the wrong information. So then they had to send them out again. So we had to deal with the people who got 2 cards and had no clue what was on them. We had people sending money in by mail that just paid whatever it said on the card, and it wasn't even their vehicle. So it's a complicated thing to have to deal with at that time, and so we had that problem as well. So a lot of the things aren't necessarily anything we have any control over, but we still have to do
Madam
what we
Chair,
do.
You know, Pam, actually, when that second mailing of stuff went out from the state, I got calls at home from people who couldn't reach you, and they were trying to call and, couldn't get through. And so that's why it is important to answer the phone. What do you think about a kiosk in this building to help? They could be, registering their vehicle at 7:30 in the morning, at 5:15.
Well, Jeff, they already have 2 kiosks.
Not in this building.
They're not in the building, but that doesn't necessarily change what you can do at the kiosk.
I agree. I'm just wondering if that might.
And I don't know
relieve
where you're
some-
gonna find that person, because I'm not willing to give up somebody we already have to go man a kiosk in this building. And I don't think the state's willing to give you that person.
What about, and this is just another idea, what about advertising alternatives like mail and internet and stuff to people so that they don't have to come down to your window? I know that I don't have to come down to the window. I could mail in my renewals, et cetera. And, but I like to see what's going on in the line.
I'm not opposed to doing it.
Okay,
We do put it on our card
right,
that you have alternatives.
make it more
I tell
colorful.
people that on a regular basis. I speak at service clubs on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Karski?
My experience with your office has been pretty pleasant over the last year also. I've been down there several times for different things, and your staff have been helpful, and the line has moved rapidly. But I have had comments from people within the county, wondering about the hours. They say I work 8 to 5. What are your office hours?
8
now?
to 5.
Okay. Have you given any consideration to starting earlier and going later?
No.
Okay.
For one thing, it costs money.
Flex time with staff would be my suggestion, but that you are an elected official, you have to run your office how you see best. The kiosk, I had breakfast with an individual the other day who came down and he paid for his registration. He said the line was long, it went quick. I said, well, have you thought about using a kiosk? And he said, there's kiosks? He wasn't aware of that. Have you even a sign on the door if somebody's here at 7:30 that, you know, kiosks are available? Because they're self-service kiosks, correct?
Yes.
Who pays for those?
Right now, the state pays for them.
State pays for them? I know there's one at Hy-Vee on 49th.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's one on 49th in
And
Louise. And where's another one?
Out on off of East 10th Street and, yeah.
Right off of Arrowhead Parkway.
Okay. You know, I don't know what the state pays to run those, but, you know, if we could advertise that they are available, I don't think enough people are aware that they exist. It's a self-service kiosk 24/7, I believe, isn't it? So, you know, just to make people aware, a sign on the door, there's self-service kiosks at these locations, I think would be beneficial to a lot of people so they could do that, but, thank you.
Just jumping on that kiosk thing, a minute ago you said that we had to have staff to maintain it, but you just said that we don't need any staff to maintain it, so there wouldn't be any reason we couldn't have one in the building. 'Cause
Oh,
we're
you're not talking
pulling-
about a live body then?
No, right,
I thought
we
you
don't,
just
no.
wanted a, okay.
No, if we had a kiosk in the building, it doesn't cost us any money and it doesn't cost any staff time, so it would hopefully pull, even if it pulled 15 people from the window a day or 10, that's enough to put somebody on the phone.
Well, it may not cost us any money, but as taxpayers, it costs the state money.
But if it helps people with their time, that's money back in their pocket too.
And if the kiosk, and if it's not working in this building, they'll stand in that line and then they'll be on at our line anyway. It's not working correctly or they can't find their stuff.
I think that when we saw there wasn't, when I first came, I did do Saturday hours. And that was helpful to the public. I think it was a good customer service thing. But then when we had self-serve kiosks, which was an option they didn't have at that time, I decided that given the cost of everything, that it was probably more efficient and made the best use of our resources if they did the self-serve kiosks, and rather than rely on the county to fund and operate that operation. Because you had to operate the buildings and security and all that other stuff as well as just the office costs that were attributed to providing that service. I think it was a good idea then, but I think times change. We're up with the times. We have the technology to allow those people to use self-serve kiosks, and we can. But there's a whole lot of work that cannot be done at a self-serve kiosk. Therein lies some of the problem. If you have title work of any kind, you have to come down here.
Other questions, comments?
And I might point out that we have two of the largest car dealerships in the state in Minnehaha County. So that makes our job even probably more of a bigger problem than it would be if you lived in Shmee or somewhere.
I'm interested, I know that we've talked in the past about the GovTech program that would allow people to do multiple parcels at a time. And I'm curious if your office is looking into that as a way to cut down on your mailing and to better serve your customers.
What do we do?
I don't know what GovTech you're talking about.
Okay, well, I'm pretty sure there have been conversations about it, but Monty has information, and I think that that would be an opportunity for people who own multiple parcels to handle their payments at one time. And I suggest that we schedule a demonstration of that and to see how that might help with some of your staffing issues.
They can pay multiple parcels at a time.
It's an online payment of property taxes, which is what I understand.
Yep.
Yeah, we
And
do
they
that
every
already.
day.
No, you can only pay one parcel, you have to put in your bank routing number. With some of these other solutions that other South Dakota counties are using, you could say, I'm such and such construction company, here's my 50 parcels, and you could put in your one bank routing number and check out. You can check it out again.
Well, you can have a demonstration if you want. I'm familiar with the process, but I run my office, and so,
They can pay them online, but they just have to put it in each parcel at how many ever parcels they have, because then they have a confirmation number for each parcel that they pay online.
Well, and in fact, I think that may be more efficient because it's easy. When we get multi-lists from the bank, they look at each, we end up refunding stuff because they paid wrong parcels. So if you do it one at a time, that means you're really looking at that record and deciding it's something you owe or you don't owe.
Well, I know I've had property owners that have large number of parcels that have been very interested in that option. And so, you know, I think the general flavor of the comments up here is that we think that there might be other technology enhancements to your office that could possibly address some of the staffing concerns that you have. And then we just want to make sure that we've explored all those options.
Well, give me an example of a technology thing that we aren't already doing. One thing about technology is phone is a technology, but if you don't have anybody to answer it, it isn't doing you any good. We have computers, but if there's nobody to enter the data, it doesn't do you any good. So give me an example of something that isn't dependent upon a person doing it.
An example might be putting a message on your phone system during high volume times when you aren't able to man the phone, so that folks who call in aren't just put in a holding pattern and stay on hold for multiple hours, that they understand that there isn't anybody there right now to answer the phone, and so perhaps they should call back at a time where it's not quite so busy. And you could give them options. You could have on that phone message where the kiosks are, and some of those kind of enhancements. GovTech is an enhancement. A kiosk in the building is an enhancement. I think those are the kinds of things that we are looking at as a commission to have some confidence that you've explored those and that you're utilizing those options to the fullest.
We're working closely with IT on some of those issues. We've tried a variety of things on the phone. We do allow GovTech, and we tell people about it, but
Well, I don't think you have GovTech. I'm pretty confident
I
that
don't know
that's.
anything about GovTech.
well, what I know we have used it, but
So I just have a question on the kiosk that you guys are,
well,
to be
There
able
may
to
be
put in
more
the
than
building, where would
one
you put this
service.
kiosk?
I guess.
Well,
we
that we'd
don't-
be looking for some input from your office, but we were hoping that possibly, I mean, one of the options would be to have it here in this building so that folks have access to it in an option instead of,
Right, but I'm as like a citizen that walks down the hallway, there is no option. You have the ATM machine that's right there, and the kiosks are not a skinny thing. They are a big ATM machine. They do take up space.
well, I think it'd be an opportunity to sit down and visit with facilities and see, you know, do some brainstorming and see if there is any option. I don't think it's been considered very fully, and perhaps it is not workable, but it's an idea that could be explored fully.
and we'll give it the
further.
weight it deserves.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to item 7, fleet management. I think we'll go ahead and do this fleet management discussion, and then we'll just take a quick break.
Morning, Craig Dewey, Commission Office. At the recent Commission meeting on June 4th, you had a presentation from Wong Nystrom with Enterprise Fleet Services. He provided an updated proposal, which he walked through with you, and there was some time for question and answer. As this process has been researched, I'm just looking for further direction from you, whether that is an option that the county wishes to pursue or not, or if there are still some additional questions. I know there were a couple questions from commissioners that I have passed along to Enterprise, and I'm waiting for answers for as far as references for different organizations who have increased the size of their fleet or reduced the size of their fleet based on the recommendations that Enterprise has conducted. And then there was another question about what it would be like if the county participated partially but not fully with its fleet. And again, those questions are still outstanding, but we'll look for any further guidance or direction that you would provide.
Commissioner Benninga?
Madam Chair, I would suggest that until we get the answers from Enterprise on those questions, that we don't address the fleet management concept any further. I'd like to have all the information before we do that. And it's not your fault that we don't have it, but as I said in or we had conversations about this, you know, I've seen 2 different presentations, and there's a variance between the 2, and I would like to have more information about why.
Commissioner Karski?
Couple things. One, we've heard from, Equalization, JDC, about the condition of some of our vehicles and, low mileage, but they're not going far, but almost embarrassing to put county plates in some of the vehicles that we do have, and having a fleet management would definitely take care of that problem. I don't think we need brand-new shiny vehicles running around the county, but we do need safe vehicles. And when you look at what's happened to vehicles since 2011 to date with electronic stability control, which I know from the insurance perspective is very important, the lane deviation, all the safety features that are in vehicles these days, and who we're hauling and our employees in them, I think that alone is worth considering a fleet management. My concern is more, and we emailed yesterday about the RFP need, and I know they did go through Sourcewell, which I didn't quite fully understand until we talked, but I know that you and Carol have visited about, you feel strongly that the selection process meets the RFP requirement, but I would like to see that vetted through our legal counsel to get their final opinion on that, because this is a large contract that we'd be entering into. So that would be my only concern.
Anyone else? Commissioner Barth?
I really didn't much care for the proposal. I thought it was too complicated for me to understand how we get new cars every year and we save money. It reminded me of an insurance guy trying to sell me whole life insurance, and it sounded like
He's
a great
picking on the
idea.
insurance guys, not the lawyers today.
Nice guy.
That's kind of a first, so.
Anyway, on the other hand, I do think that, like with equalization, there are issues that we need to figure out how best to arrange our fleet. And Dean is right about the safety features, but I'm not happy about enterprise there.
If I could just, my perspective of what I saw on the proposal was our savings comes from not spending $30,000 per vehicle. It comes from making a lease payment monthly instead of lump sum vehicle purchase payments. So we're going to pay, and maybe that's oversimplifying a lot of what's happening there, but instead of buying a 2020 Impala for $30,000, we're making $400 a month lease payments on that vehicle. And that's where,
And it
from what
evens
I've
out
seen.
our costs rather than having spikes and then driving them till they die or begging highway to sell us one. So.
And maybe from my point of view, I'm a little more conservative. I don't have a car payment. I don't have a house payment, and I just buy beer,
not life insurance.
Heiberger?
I'm still waiting for the end of the proposal and stuff because it was a little confusing since there was two of them. But I think fleet management is definitely a good way to go because we won't have old cars and we will have more safer cars. But I guess the bottom line is in the dollars and how it works. But when we just spent over $200,000 on sheriff's vehicles, it's just kind of scary. And obviously, we're not doing it for the sheriff's department because there's a lot of other issues on that side. But I think fleet management makes sense as long as it makes dollar sense.
Well, I would
Commissioner
just
Bennigan?
oversimplify the conversation. It's not always about the upfront cost. It's about the backside cost and what the residual value is and where that goes. And in this case, it goes to enterprise, not to the county in most cases, unless we want to buy it out. So that's a piece of it. The other thing is that he divided that into 4 different quadrants, and I don't remember all the pieces exactly number-wise, but the first quadrant does make sense to try it as I'd say a test pilot. And then the other 3, I have some questions about, which would maybe decide on the long term whether that's really a good deal or not.
All right.
Just to chime in one more thing, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, but we're under no contractual obligation as far as number of vehicles or time commitments or anything like that if we entered into this program with them. Is that correct?
What Wong articulated on Tuesday was that, and has articulated to me before as well, is that the way it works with Enterprise is each year there is a one-year agreement. So if the county would like to part ways with Enterprise after a year, that would be the county's option to do so. Really, the only obligation would be to the vehicles themselves until the lease term is up for the vehicles that are already on the plan. So when a lease term would expire, the county would be provided a buyout option for the remainder of that cost from Enterprise, and the county could then choose whether to buy the vehicle or whether to sell it.
But that commitment isn't for a certain number of vehicles, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Yeah, the county in the end would choose and have full control over which recommendations that Enterprise would adopt in terms of how many vehicles. I know some organizations where I checked their references, some of them took a time out on further implementing any of Enterprise's recommendations, sometimes for 2 years. So that would remain in the county's control as far as the number of vehicles any year, or if the county would even acquire newer vehicles through Enterprise's recommendations.
And the other kind of kicker on that deal would be like, for example, equalization. If they had 13 vehicles and 14 appraisers that needed a vehicle that day, we could go on a daily basis and rent a vehicle through Enterprise also. Is that correct?
That would be an additional add-on option, yes.
We could do that right now if we wanted to, I think. I mean, you could,
I think you'd get a better rate on it, or?
I have not seen any of the rates. I do know an option that some people have adopted with Enterprise if a certain department has a need for extra vehicles. Let's say a whole department needs to go to a conference, and they could specify the number of vehicles they needed. If they needed them for 3 days, Enterprise would drop those vehicles off, and then once they were parked back at the agreed-upon location, then Enterprise would pick them up, and it would be a better daily rate than what someone off the street could get if they went to Enterprise.
just to follow up on some of these comments, I think it would be helpful to have some information from Wong about what an exit strategy would look like. You know, if we exited after, 1 year, what that would look like for the county, so that, or if we exited after 2 years, what that might look like for the county, so we can understand not only what it is going in, but what it would look like coming out. Okay, Commissioner
Yeah, I wanted to
Heiberger?
jump on that too, because that was actually my thought, was like, if we just did this 1 year and replaced 8 cars, and then we decided to quit, I would assume we'd have to buy those leases out, and so it would be a huge chunk of money if we just bought 8 cars that were brand new. And so, yeah, it's super important to know what the exit strategy is if we do it for 2 years and then say, oh, we decided we don't want to do this anymore. It could be really expensive to get out.
Okay, anything else that we need from Craig? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the direction.
Yep. I think we could take a 10-minute break for everyone, and then we'll be back about 20 till, okay?
and he's going down.
Okay. Okay. Are you leading this, or am I just, okay, you're gonna lead this?
Well, I'll be
Okay.
up there.
Okay,
and
I'll
you
let,
can
yeah.
kinda-
Okay, that's good. That's good. All right, so at this point, we've heard all the presentations about new positions that have been requested and kind of most of the general information. And so I think our task now turns towards making, at least having some preliminary discussions about decisions, difficult decisions that we need to make. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Carol, and we're going to see about some of those items, and then we can decide what we need to do. After today, we reconvene a week from Tuesday. So we don't meet next week, we meet
It's the 19th.
the 19th. So we'd have about a week to kind of consider things and any additional information we want, and then we'll meet again on the 19th. Okay, Carol.
Yes, Commissioners, I just want to bring back us to, it's always, there's no easy decisions anybody makes today, but as we start with those that maybe you're ready to start having some discussions about. I've got the vehicles in there. I think after hearing you guys talk about fleet management, we'll probably slide that one by. And, oh, sorry about that. And move into outside agencies, if you guys have any direction yet that you want to go through and give us.
Are we going to skip the building fund and come back
Oh,
to that
sorry,
later?
I was going in there. You can go in any order you want.
Oh, that's okay. Just
got-
on the agenda that I have, the building fund is first. If I can do them in order, then I don't get as
Yep, we can go
easily
to building
lost.
fund. There you go. Mark looks for your direction. If there's any questions you have or conversations you want to have.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. So, I guess I kind of covered everything in the last meeting, unless there's some additional questions.
So I think the question right now would be, are there questions about the building fund? Is there any things people want to see changed? Any items that you feel like need to be adjusted?
Commissioner Bender?
Yes.
I feel like we cannot wait for our properties to sell in order to do the capital improvements that are necessary to squeeze our staff into this building. I think that we need to take action immediately in next year to find the space for additional attorneys and other staff in this building or wherever, whether it means the public safety building or the one over there. We need to take action and plan for it immediately. And we're all hoping that we sell our property up on West, but until it sells, we have to find a way to function. And anyway, I just think we need to plan for that.
Commissioner Karski.
I 100% agree with you, Commissioner, and I perceive more of the building fund as being our ongoing, yeah, projects that we're going to be looking forward to building, but also maintaining the assets that we have. And, our building committee, we've been meeting and discussing the projects that you're talking about. Making sure that our state's attorney has adequate office space. We can relocate equalization to the facility that they need to be in to keep people together. And that's a bigger discussion that I don't know if we have to include with this part of the budget discussion, because I think the works of our project management with Craig Dewey and the committee that we're looking at assembling, we're probably going to be addressing that greater need more appropriately through that, would be my suggestion.
And I would just agree that I think we all recognize that that is a priority, and that's part of the reason that we're putting together this group to help us identify funding sources to do that and priorities. And they'll be meeting hopefully this summer. The plan is that there'll be some meetings this summer and reporting back to us early in the fall, and so we can start to get to work on that. Kim Adamson.
If I could just make one additional comment, the proposed budget we have for the building fund at this time is basically a break-even proposal where our budgeted expenditures are approximately equal to our tax revenue. We ended 2018 with about $1 million balance in cash reserves in the building fund, and that is a level that I think it would be prudent for us to maintain. And so I just wanted to point out that what's been proposed, we would be able to preserve that $1 million reserve in the fund.
Kim?
That was my question. What was the reserve balance? Thank you.
Kim?
Go ahead, Commissioner Karski.
Through our levy, we have a certain amount that can go for building fund, correct?
We do have a levy for building fund, yes, and it is itemized on this chart you're seeing today. The building fund levy for 2020 is about $4.4 million. It's way at the bottom.
I have that one.
And the majority of that levy is used to make some bond payments, which are a little over $3 million. Now, the last of the most significant portion of those bonds will be paid off in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, the document that we're looking at was in our budget presentation on Tuesday, if you're trying to find it on Dropbox.
It's underneath June 6th also.
I'm sorry?
Oh.
It's underneath June 6th.
Oh, okay.
Oh, she's got it in here, and this one here too.
Oh, there it is. I was one page away.
Yeah, you were almost there.
Okay. Any other questions then about what we have in our balanced budget for capital improvements out of the building fund proposed for 2020?
I think you've done a good job of writing a good budget. I don't think to me, it doesn't look like there's any waste in there. It's all just routine maintenance things that we need to do.
Any other comments? Commissioner Benniga?
I would just suggest that at this point, we adopt what we have, and because it's almost balanced, if you will, without going beyond at this point, and then give the building fund committee, which has been formed recently, an extra 2 months is all we're talking about,
Yeah.
to fund some of the capital changes that we are recommending or considering, rather than messing with this one.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. You can see that we'll have some more flexibility next year in this fund, so. Okay. Looks like you did a great job, and we're
Thank
all
you.
pretty comfortable with it. Thank you very much. Back to Carol.
So
We can
at
go
this
to
point,
outside
really-
agency. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so at this point, really no changes that you guys are directing,
Right.
correct? Since I
Mhm.
stepped out for just a minute. Thank you. It's nice to put a check on something. Outside agencies, do you guys have any direction, any comments, any questions about that?
Commissioner Barth.
Again, Carol, have we heard from MedStar?
No,
And ambulances are on the agenda on the 19th.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So really, you're just, if you have any input other than ambulances, thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Heiberger.
Well, the contractual ones, we don't have a choice on those, I don't believe, like the animal control and the CCOG and the IVCs. So those ones can stay the same. And then I'm just wondering at this point in the budget if everything else stays as it was at the 2019 approved level.
Commissioner Benniga?
I'm having, I understand where they all come from, and frankly, I'm part of that nonprofit group, but to see a 50% increase in request is not, I don't think, feasible for the county at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say that I'm in the same camp, that given the other challenges that we have, I recognize that every nonprofit is having challenges as well, but I don't see that we can be the source of additional funds, particularly this year. Any other comments?
The other question I have, if I might, is when the Compass Center and LSS potentially consolidate that program, before we were supporting the Compass Center at 35 and LSS in that program wasn't being supported according to the approved 2019 budget. So we're going from 35 to just lost my place, to 109, if my math is right. That seems to be more than a consolidation, so to speak.
I did place a call yesterday to the Compass Center.
Okay.
Because when I went through and looked at their application, I wasn't identifying a specific dollar very easily on doing that. I do know that when I talked to Michelle Margrave, who's left now, great transition that the Compass Center did on that. That was one verbal thing that we had the conversation was about. I said, so that 35,000 would go to LSS. Compass Center would not have an additional request other than the DV funds or the domestic abuse funds. So I just wanted to confirm that since she's no longer there. But that was the verbal conversation that I had with her a couple months ago.
But it still doesn't explain to me why there's significant difference from a 2019 request, which was 35, and now it's going to 109, regardless if she's there or not.
To get to 109, Commissioner, explain.
It's
that.
50 in new request down below, and the Compass Center is 59 above. To me, that's 109. And in the 2019 approved budget, it was 35 to Compass Center and 0 to LSS. So
Okay.
that's my question.
No.
My initial on that, and it does get confusing with the domestic violence funds as to how those are requested out of there. I'm confirming with her, but from my understanding, that general funds goes to 0, not to 59,000 for 2020. Probably the major discussion you guys want to have is, do you want to take that $35,000 up to Lutheran Social Services? I did not have any conversation with them about increasing those dollars. So,
Excuse me. I looked back to 2019. Compass Center did request 59,000 last year as well in 2019, but they were only awarded 35,000. So they
But-
they didn't increase their request, but I do understand your question about with the transfer of service, why they're still requesting 59,000.
Correct.
Yep.
I think we need to ask that question and get a little more clarification from probably LSS, not Compass Center.
yeah. And understandably, those two nonprofits are a little bit gun shy about signing on the dotted line until they know that the commission is willing to transfer that money, that 35,000. That's an I mean, I guess I can appreciate that.
My understanding was when Compass was transferring that program to LSS, Compass Center was all for the money moving
Yes.
with it to LSS.
Yeah.
But now they're probably asking for some additional
Well, probably. The other thing too is since it wasn't since nothing's finalized, I think just to cover the bases, they've included that 35,000 in there. And that's what Kim, you went through the narrative also on there. I wasn't able to identify that information on there, so.
And I think, I mean, if we're all comfortable leaving it at 35,000 and having that 35,000 go to whoever is providing the services, I think that is I think that's what we want to do. And if, and I think from what I understood from meeting with Michelle, is that they just wanted some verbal assurances that that money would follow those services. Commissioner Heiberger.
The domestic abuse fund then for the Compass Center they will continue to get that $15,000 and that won't transfer over to LSS? So those are those are opposite sides of the program?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yeah, one
And that's what I-
provides services to the abuser and one provides services to the abused.
I have a question. I
Commissioner Barth.
probably just am lost, but where are our dues to NACO and the SDACC?
You know, that's a completely different line item. I can't tell you why
Okay.
it's ever been set up that way, but it's,
I just want to make
It
sure
is.
we've
You
got
are
it in the
correct.
budget, and I don't see it yet.
Those items are budgeted in the commission office.
That's what I
budget.
thought, yeah.
Mhm.
And then the county officials are in the treasurer's office, auditor's office. They're split between
Okay.
the participating.
Good, I just wanted to find out where they were.
and Commissioner Barth, those numbers are very similar.
I
They're
know.
right around that $25,000 mark, so it is confusing, and we usually pay them about the same time of the year. If you're okay with my furthering that conversation with the Compass Center, that there is support from the commission to take that 35,000 from Compass to LSS, I'll make sure we got everything locked up by that time frame then as to wherever that money goes to, and that's it. You okay with
So
that?
I think what I heard was no increases, and that for the Compass Center, $35,000 would follow who's ever providing those services.
Correct. And when you talk about no increases, I'm looking at the Sioux Empire Fair Association also would stay at 150,000.
I think personally, I think given the contributions we are making towards the building fund side of things, towards the buildings out there, and that we contribute a fair amount over to the fair right now. And I don't really see this budget giving us much latitude to increase that.
And then one other question, are we going to decrease the funding to Carroll Institute for the 2020 projection?
Yes.
Yes, that's part of that
Yes.
Yeah.
program. Yep.
Because that is the amount we're paying this year.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
And domestic fund is not changing percentage-wise. Okay, we have direction. Thank you.
All right. God, we knocked out two things. We were on a roll. Now we get to the hard things. I think given our conversation about vehicles and fleet management, that vehicles is probably best left until the 19th with some hope that we have some better direction on fleet management. And perhaps if we don't, we're going to have to make a decision without that, or perhaps a decision to delay that decision for another year. So that takes us to staffing. Carol.
Okay, I'm gonna could you guys let Carrie Beaver and Jeff know? Thank you. And I pulled this up on the screen, and I don't know why it's not showing. Why that isn't flipping. There we go. Carrie, you're up. We knocked out building fund and other agencies. Well, great.
Okay, so you have the staffing request in front of you. One thing I'm just going to point out before you look at it, I did have a small typo in the growth for the treasurer's office.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, instead of 21%, it was 5%, so just wanted you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair,
Commissioner
Carrie, is she requesting 3 FTEs?
She is requesting 3 FTEs.
How did her budget stay flat, or as flat as it is?
I imagine it didn't. Well, we haven't built in any of the new positions yet, so
I think it's her operating budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Carrie, how difficult is it to get the information we talked briefly about before in the total overtime requests that we have paid last year or 2018 versus what we record as comp time?
we can run reports from the timesheet system fairly easy and count.
How fast can you do that?
Oh, I don't know. I could probably, yeah, okay, great. The overtime money you should, of course, have on the budget to be able to compare backwards. The one thing that you talked about this morning that I don't know that we'll get a good handle on quite as easily is the flex time, because there's not a lot of impact.
You just want current comp balances?
I want to, when you look at staffing issues and the balance between paying someone overtime or comp time versus staffing requests on the need for those, I frankly would like to see what those numbers look like, total
Total comp time,
countywide.
total comp time for 2018 and.
If we have a report for that, I think we have reports that would show current comp balances, but I understand what you're asking for, and I can't think of.
Stores a cumulative earned amount for each year.
Cumulative earned, okay.
But wouldn't we need Dawn to splice it by department? Yeah, we can
I'll
pull
see
it
what I
up
can
easily
come up
for
with, I'll have to
employees.
make a request to my staff to see if that's something that we can.
Can you
Great.
do that before the 19th?
Ah, yeah, I hope so.
Dawn walks on water. She can probably do it.
We'll have it by this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, sounds good.
And it doesn't affect some positions, and that's fine, but how we compare some of the quote support systems to the request is an opportunity for us to compare those.
Good, fair question, so.
Is there any additional information we can provide for you that'll help you assess the requests?
Any other questions about staffing? I mean, we had really great presentations. I thought everybody did a great job making their case for what they feel like they need, and that's their job. And our job is to take available funds and figure out how best to spend them. And I think Kim Adamson in the auditor's office has helped us to see quite clearly that given the challenges with the extra pay period, and I agree with comments Commissioner Benega made the other day, that I think going forward, it would be prudent for us to try to accrue for that so that we don't hit this one major, try to eat a whole elephant in 1 year is kind of how it feels. But nevertheless, we are where we are this year. And so any new position we fund is, we're already in an opt-out situation. I mean, we in every position we fund is going to have to be paid for by opt-out. I mean, that's just the reality of where we are. And so these are even, not that I don't ever find this an easy process any year that I've been here, but it makes it even, that much more challenging. I don't know if folks feel like they want to take that information that we provided and chew on it for a week, or if there's some opportunity this morning to have discussions about, positions that are in and positions that are not, that we aren't going to be able to fund. I know Commissioner Benega has some questions that I think are valid for some additional information.
I would give just one that is going to be budget neutral, in my opinion, the diversion coordinator. And because I'm not ready really to talk about a bunch of the rest of them either, but the diversion coordinator, I asked Kim last week about how much money was generated from, because for every successful diversion that's done by the diversion officer, the state pays us back. And in 2018, the payback from the state was $85,692 and some odd cents. And the position is $65,000. So that position is paid for by successful diversions. And as Aaron had said earlier, he feels like there is more funding to come from the state by successful diversions just because of the way the allocations have been going. So,
Great, one down.
yeah. So I think that's an absolute yes, because that is funded.
Kind of a neutral pass-through. I thought Commissioner Barth had a very good question to JDC about whether that position could possibly be, I don't know, staged is the right word, but, added in at a later point in the year so that it had slightly less effect on the budget for next year. Warden Gromer was kind enough to come over here because we were trying to do some other brainstorming, and I'm just curious whether you think there's any flexibility with some of your 2020 positions to start, maybe not January 1, but slightly later. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's all right. Carrie and I had a conversation about that, obviously, when I got here. The way we have it structured now is we're trying to hire the first 6 in 2019, and then we were looking for the next 12 in 2020. And with our conversation, I think we can split that into 3 groups as opposed to 2, which basically allows us to push 6 of the staff off to hire a March 1st hire date rather than January 1st.
April 1st hire date, maybe? Beginning of this?
Maybe April 1st gets very tight to our projected opening day.
Okay.
Opening day of the jail. I mean, in reality, when we start to look at hiring these larger classes of corrections officers, it gets very difficult for us to fill those spots all at one time. So pushing them back and breaking them into 3 groups rather than, one smaller group and then one larger group, I think we can make that work to split those 3 ways rather than 2.
Okay.
Do we know-
Commissioner Heiberger?
Do we know how much money that would save if we push those 6 hires back by
Kim's running her magic fingers over here.
85,000.
85,000? So
roughly
basically
was
that
what
would
we're-
staff
we
one more
talked about
person.
there. Kim can verify my numbers, which she usually does fairly well, points out my errors.
Well, we appreciate you guys being willing to think a little outside the box with us here on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all really, my end date is really contingent on whatever we get occupancy of the jail expansion. Obviously, if there's a delay in that, that gives us a little more flexibility in our hiring timeframe. But I doubt we're gonna be substantially early, but they're still on schedule for that June-ish of 2020 date, so.
Did you have anything
Okay.
you wanted to add?
That was just what I was gonna mention, is as we get closer, if that date gets pushed off, because Jeff and I were just talking about the 5th floor expansion, we don't have a set date on that. It's kind of been pushing a little bit, and anticipating that this project could as well. As we go, we'll certainly be mindful of that. It just takes so many weeks to get that staff trained up that we'll back that off of that date as it comes. So that may help as well.
Yeah. On that, Commissioner
Madam Chair,
Barth?
since Michelle's in the room, Metro Communications budget, I think, also has an increase of $80,000, as I recall. Is it $80,000 for Minnehaha County, or is that the total increase that we would be doing 25% of?
No, your increase was 83, I wanna say.
Okay, I was close.
And that's just off the top of my head, but I believe that was 83. That was to hire their 4
Is
positions.
that the share for the county, or is that the total increase between the
That would
city
be the
and
county's 25%.
Just FYI. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion anybody'd like to have about any positions?
Since I'm asking dumb questions and asking for more help with the budget process, is there any way we can track when we have turnover, what we're saving on an annual basis over the last 2 or 3 years versus what the actuals are? Oh, now I gotta say that again.
He's looking for personnel savings due to the cost of turnover each year. Like, could you be able to pull how much money we didn't spend on personnel because the positions were open?
Thank you.
I can read your mind.
That's scary.
Yeah, it would be.
If I could have that number also, it would make it easier for me to decide how many of these positions we would be able to fund and what we could fund financially.
Well, that is really factored into our cash applied number though already. We make the assumption that the $4.5 million cash applied is comprised of the 5% reserve against our revenue, and then the remainder, which is about 2.8 million, 2.9 million, and the remainder of that is the assumed salary savings we're gonna have because of turnover.
true, but my argument then would be, not an argument, but discussion would be that our annual payroll budget is always higher than the actual. And the 5% reserve, which we can talk about forever, is just a legislative kind of requirement versus a real requirement. So if we had those two numbers combined, it would tell us more about what the actual is going to be historically rather than projected. Correct?
Then you're proposing you would budget to a lower cash applied number, you would reduce your
Potentially.
salary budget?
No,
It would just be swapping out cash applied for a lower salary and benefit budget then.
probably, but more importantly, it would also maybe increase the number of staff persons we would hire based on real cash numbers versus the 5% cash applied number. In my mind, that's what it's like. And I can let you think about that for a little bit.
Because I'm not really following how it translates to.
When you look back at the actuals versus the budget, there's always a variance. And that variance is also figured into cash applied when we make those decisions. If we didn't use that, if you took the cash applied philosophy out and just used what the real hard cost would be, I'd like to know what the variance is. Does that make sense? You're not shaking your head either way.
She's thinking hard.
Sell life insurance at some point?
I think maybe,
He does though.
could have some follow-up. I mean, I think I understand. I think what you're asking is just prove to me that that cash applied number really translates into what the differential was in our.
You should be an attorney.
I think that's really what he's just, let's prove it up. So, okay, we've hit the life insurance people and the attorneys. So any other professions on the table here?
Are there any other positions that, could go later in the year just because it frees up a little bit more money? I'm just was looking to at facilities. I mean, I don't know if that's somebody that has to start in January. Could they start after the new jail opens? Is it somebody that's needed before the new jail opens? Mark, do you want to just respond to that? It doesn't equate to a lot of money, but $30,000 if it starts way later in the year.
Yeah, as far as that point, I won't need anybody till, the jail opens, if it was a little bit before, so I had some time to do some training, but I could work with that, so.
So possibly a May hire.
It's just a couple of months.
Okay, well, we're whittling away here. Thank you for being creative as well. Anybody else? For the good of the order?
Madam Chair, I'm looking at 3 additional people in the treasurer's office. I'm not in love with that idea. I don't know what the correct number might be. Maybe it's 1. But 3 is a lot.
Don't think until we've seen some changes that we've suggested that we put anybody in there, because I don't know what there's got to be an average time of what it takes for a person to go through a window. What's the average time? And so if the average time is 10 minutes per window and you move one of those people, and I'm not going to run her office because I don't want her job, but if you move one of those people off and you increase the wait time by 2 minutes or 3 minutes and you can answer the phone, that's a big deal. And if we put a kiosk in the hallway, and I'm sure we can find a spot, but if we put a kiosk, how many people will that actually take out of the line? Because if I live in North Sioux Falls and I have to drive clear down to 49th Street and I don't have transportation, well, I guess you do if you have a car, but maybe that's a hardship for you anyway. If we have a kiosk here, maybe that would be helpful. I mean, there's got to be a way to look at those numbers too, because they've got to know how many renewals they do by the window, and maybe they do 0, and so then it isn't an issue. But if they do 30 a day or 10 a day, I would think that that would be another, we can figure that out by data. How many minutes, if you take 20 people out of the line every day, or 15, how much time does that equate to at the window, and can some of those staff members, I just think it's a numbers game, and I think we should be able to figure that out. I don't think it's my responsibility. I think that's the treasurer's responsibility, but we would be willing to help if we needed to, so.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
to
Barth.
Cindy's point there, I think also with the kiosk, you could have people doing their renewals at 7:30 in the morning and 5:15 in the evening.
Conversation back about Gerald's about overtime and stuff. There is no overtime in the treasurer's office, and maybe we offer an overtime budget so that there is an extra half an hour in the morning. I don't know, just being creative. It's better than adding another whole employee. I don't know what the cost of an employee versus an extra half hour of overtime in peak times of the year would be. I don't know. So
Commissioner Bendigo?
You can read my mind.
I can hear you sighing over there.
I hate doing this, but I think that we need that other information and digest, if you will, before we make a final decision on the 19th, because I think it's important to see the whole picture of the puzzle before we start putting pieces away, so to speak. And if we have that information, every one of these positions was justified in some manner, but I would like to have that total picture before I can make a finalized conversation.
And I honestly didn't anticipate that we were going to make final decisions today. I thought it was an opportunity for us to have some initial conversation and react a little bit. Sometimes just talking out loud helps us to think of any other information that we might have. I saw the state's attorneys walked in, and so if you have an opportunity, maybe you have really creative problem-solving ideas here for us. We're looking for miracles, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Aaron McGowan, State's Attorney, and Ms. Boyd was kind enough to let me know what the conversations were. Just thinking on my way down the hall here, the State's Attorney has 2 issues. One is staffing, 2 is space. What I would offer up as a compromise would be that if we were to get one digital discovery tech in January, I have room for one now where our volunteer was previously, and perhaps we could put the second one off till June or July. With the 2 attorney positions, if we could get one in January and put the other off till later in the year, that would help us with our space problems, plus give us a glimmer of hope in the future that we would be at adequate staffing level. So I would just offer that as a possible option for you to make some cuts pursuant to some of our requests. So I just wanted to throw that option out there.
Very much appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much. Commissioner Heiberger.
I think that fits right into what Aaron's talking about. Is we are working on that space issue, and we all recognize this is priority too. And so as we have office space, it'll be easier to put people in offices later in the year when we actually have them. And so that is going to be part of, I think, our conversation going forward, is that not everybody gets to start January 1st just because of the space issue, and we need to hopefully have that figured out quickly.
And I was actually in the middle of an email to all of you to help illustrate some of our issues with digital discovery. So in the next few minutes, you'll be receiving that, and that'll, I think, give you a better picture of some of our challenges. But we are open to some of those creative options, and with the space limitations we have, I think that makes sense to do it that way. So
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, anything else? Go ahead, Commissioner
Where do the
Karski.
vehicle requests come into our conversation? Have we really touched on that?
Well, I kind of said earlier that I thought, given the fact that we already had a conversation about fleet management and that we're waiting for some additional information, I thought perhaps we'd go back to vehicles. on June 19th, when we might have some information about fleet management, but we could certainly discuss it if there's something in particular you
no.
wanted to discuss.
Just to keep in mind that some of those vehicle requests come with staff. you know,
Correct,
like the
yeah.
Staffing, like equalization and that type of thing, and, yeah.
I think Kim's pretty good. If we decide not to fund a position, she's pretty quick to take any associated vehicle out of the equation as well.
Okay.
Obviously, lots of these decisions are interrelated, when it comes to positions and vehicles and opt-out there. It's hard to really separate them into a separate conversation directly.
Really, there is only one vehicle tied to a new position, and that is an equalization.
Yeah, okay. My only concern is, and we've been having a discussion of, putting off hires for 2 or 3 or even 6 months, but we're just kicking the can down the road. Next year, those are fully funded positions. I mean, I appreciate the impact to next year's budget, but the impact is felt truly in full in the 2021 budget, but, we got to be looking forward at that too.
Right. But we will have a $1.4 million available next year that we are, this is a one-time expense this year, so that helps. Gives us, every year I think next year's going to be better. That optimism is starting to fade. But, I mean, there is some reason to think that we do have some, at least that is a clear one-time cost. And then if we start accruing for it, we will take it in smaller bites. Anything else? If not, I think we'd move to a discussion on matrix adjustments, and I'd invite Carrie Deaver to come forward.
Can try and bring back up the items from the previous agenda, and if you'd like to see that or go over any of that data again. Carol, are you coming to my rescue?
Carrie, are you going back from your human services budget overview? Is that what you're going back to?
Yep, that's right. It would have been probably the first full slide on that. That was reloaded for today.
No,
Okay, thanks.
no,
I appreciate it.
just pulled the one out, so, okay, I always have to stop and.
I mean, I would say ultimately with this, a few things to take into consideration
Yesterday's
next year.
budget.
We are in contract negotiations with one union yet. We're hopeful that you'll see a recommendation for a contract approval next Tuesday for one other. So really, if you were talking about matrix adjustment, you'd be talking about your non-union staff today. It's always sort of an unusual situation trying to look forward because you're predicting really what you need to do. So taking a look at that historical data will hopefully give you a good general gauge on what we should be doing for the future. Thank you, guys. All right, thank you. So there's the data. And I think as we talked about last time, or on Tuesday as well, the only thing that we really know for the future are what maybe some of our comparable entities who also have union contracts are doing for the future. And so you have 3 of those. Well, 2 that are union contracts and the one that we know what the state's planning to do for next year. Any questions on this? Don't know if you're ready to make a decision or if this is something you want to revisit on June 19th as well.
Thank you, John.
Comments for Carrie? I recognize it's difficult to make decisions when there's a lot of things up in the air, including staffing choices, but I would say that I personally think that while we've got specific issues in specific departments, overall, we need to take care of all of the employees in Minnehaha County. I think some of this data shows that we certainly aren't leading in that area. And we have increasing issues with recruiting when, particularly at certain levels, certain positions, it's a kind of a challenge we hear constantly. And so I personally am going to be in favor of a matrix adjustment that's a little healthier than what we have done the last few years. I recognize it's a difficult budget year, but I think it's an area where we can tell all the employees of Minnehaha County how much we appreciate them. I can tell you that one of the things that I mean, I do not like budget hearings, but I have really, one of the things that I really have been, have enjoyed about being on the commission is meeting so many county employees that I never would have honestly met otherwise. And I am so very impressed by the quality of people that we have generally and the very difficult work a lot of them do day in and day out. And so, you know, I think I'm going to be inclined to go probably do a 3% matrix adjustment. That's where I'm at right now.
Well, Madam Chair, we could at least pencil that in pending, you know, further decisions. Put that into our budget, and you know, we could change it later. And what does that cost us, Carrie? 3%.
What did we come up with, Kim?
And that is on your means of finance.
Yeah, if you look at the cash applied illustration.
The good old days when it was less than $1 million.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, we will pencil that in. So the next item is a means update. Kim, I'm not sure if that's something I don't know if we've given you enough information to do that.
Well, the agenda says it's an update. It's really more just of a review of what we talked about on Tuesday. So let me try to zoom in here. And so this is an analysis we looked at on Tuesday, showing the impact to cash applied of various funding decisions. So the preliminary budget projection we have that we're starting with leaves us with a cash applied position of $4,568,000. If all budget requests are granted or all funded, a 3% matrix, all of the new hires, all of the outside agencies, which we already discussed today, will probably not happen. Anyway, that created a $3.4 million deficit. Okay. Then there are a couple illustrations showing different variations of funding. So again, we're starting with the $4.5 million of cash applied. I should scroll out so everybody can see all the descriptions. And then again, assuming a 3% matrix adjustment, 1.1 million, say we hire about half of the positions, or $950,000 are spent for new positions. There could be some equipment savings, equipment reductions. This still assumed funding some additional outside agency requests. Anyway, the combination of these types of funding decisions result in a $2 million budget deficit. And then in the very last illustration, illustration number 2, we're assuming that still a 3% matrix adjustment, but only funding the public safety positions for the jail. And then we would see reductions in other areas because we didn't fill positions, we don't grant all the equipment requests. That results in a $1.5 million budget shortfall.
Sadly, they didn't magically change overnight, like you didn't. So we've seen this once before. Does anybody have any questions for Kim now that kind of makes a little more sense after you've been through everything once, I think?
I mean, we know where we're going to land for outside agencies, so we can factor that in. And the big decision is still the staffing, which you are aware.
Commissioner Karski.
The only thing I'm looking at is the outside agencies and, you know, with the Carroll Institute and the $52,000. It'd be, if, you know, we're talking about keeping outside agency fundings level, maybe just putting it out there for consideration. We think about that $52,000 and keeping it within the outside agency budget, but spreading it across some of the requests that we have. Just something to think about at this point, because we are funding for an outside agency decrease of $52,275. So if we're gonna talk about keeping it level, that would truly keep it level.
Question
So,
about
oh, Commissioner Heiberger, go
Question
ahead.
about that is, but if, does that $52,000, did that increase, did that include the reduction, I'm thinking the ambulances, the ambulance that had asked for money, and when we decreased it, I don't know where the ambulances was at, because they were asking for $15,000 more, so that it might actually get eaten up, that 52,000 might get eaten up if we end up increasing the ambulance. That's, I don't know where how that money ended up.
Okay. The 62 million in appropriations that are in this up here, in the, what we've projected for appropriations, that assumed the exact same budget for outside agencies as 2019.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So when you look at illustration 1 and you have 185,000 there for outside agencies,
Yes?
if we left everything the way it was for last year, then that number would go down to 0? Am I understanding that
It would
correctly?
actually go to this reduction of $52,000.
Okay, that's what I was trying to
because-
understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If we left everybody the same and reduced Carroll Institute to what their request, what the request was for, that would be a net reduction, as Dean pointed out.
But actually, there's, because we increased CCOG just a teeny bit, and we
Well,
increased animals. So,
$500,
yeah,
yeah.
so it's not exactly that, but it's
Mhm.
close. Okay, thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you. Other questions?
I would just comment that I favor increasing funding for ambulance. That's my
We're going to
comment.
discuss that on the 19th.
Yep. We are.
Okay, so I've heard two things now. The ambulance budget, what?
We did not discuss the ambulance budget at all today.
I thought
yeah.
it's,
It's
I thought
gonna
it
be-
showed an increase to like 175 or something.
The requests are for $65,000 each, or 195,000.
95,
They've
okay.
previously been funded at 150, so that would be a $45,000 increase.
Okay.
Which is what's requested.
Yeah.
Yep.
45 would be the,
Yeah.
for all three.
Anything else on this? Gives us a pretty good idea of, I think this illustration personally is very helpful. It helps us to kind of see the impact of various decisions and what it has, how it affects an opt-out. So Commissioner
And-
Heiberger? Oh, go ahead.
Well, as time passes, we'll continue to monitor revenues to see if we've got any room in the projection to adjust our revenue forecast. Also, we're continue to review department expenditures and work with department heads if there's some areas we think could be adjusted there.
Commissioner Heiberger?
A sheet that we had in our drawers before, which I think mine is missing, is that the cost to the taxpayers for a $1 million opt-out. I couldn't find it in my drawer.
Oh.
So maybe we could just have that sheet again. You
I
could
can
talk through it, but
report to
maybe-
you that the impact of $1 million on, we have approximately $15 billion of value in the county. That impact is 6.7 cents on the mill levy. So that would.
$6.07, oh,
6.7 cents on the mill levy.
Okay, gotcha.
And that translates to $6.70 on a $100,000 value
For a million, for each.
for a million.
Yeah.
If you round it to $7, approximately $7 per million per $100,000 of value.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have,
Commissioner Karski?
don't want to burden you, Kim, but, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is stuff that I'm in favor of supporting. You know, if I sent you just an email and said, if I supported you know, these positions.
To
would-
plug
would it be
in
pretty
those
easy?
variables, it'd be very simple. I could do it here today if you know
Okay.
what you want to do.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Good to know, because I was gonna sit down with my calculator and figure it out.
No, we
Love
can come up with
technology.
whatever combination, whatever scenario you'd like to see.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. So this is our opportunity for public comment. Anybody here who wants to speak about anything that's not on the agenda? The budget is the only thing on the agenda, so I would think that that's possibly the thing that you shouldn't talk about. But if you want to come forward, I'll give you a little latitude. It's like 5 minutes of latitude.
And where the latitude is about the same as the Pyrenees between Spain and France, that's the latitude.
We'll keep the longitude down to a minimum.
That's different.
Identify yourself and give your address, please.
Madam Chair and other commissioners. Little perspective, I remember the first county commission meeting that I attended was just down the hall across from the elevator, and that's when Dick Flynn was on the commission, and that's about 35 years ago. And the meeting room has moved around a time or two. It seems like everything that you're doing is SSDD, same stuff, different day. It wouldn't be a budget hearing. It wouldn't be a budget hearing if you didn't have the state's attorney and the public defender asking for more hires. I mean, it just wouldn't be a budget hearing. There was a time when the city came to the county and borrowed money so they could make it through their budget year. There was a time when that happened, and I don't know what's happened in the interim. Maybe those of us that have been part of the county commission need to shame our legislators into being more attentive to the process that happens at the county level, because the county commission pays attention to the state budget hearings, because that has impact on them, but the state doesn't pay attention to the county commissions around the state. Now, it always appealed to me that the state was much like the mafia. They did the work and the monies came in and they did their thing, and the county commissioners were the hitman because they get allocated. They have to go do this regardless of what happens. That's what they have to do. It's kind of like being a farmer, you know, next year is going to be better. Next year is going to be better. And that's the attitude of most of the county commissioners that I've seen. Now excuse me, the budgets, the way they are done is, I've always been of the opinion that the county commission does it differently than the city and the state. The city has the mayor and their minions do the budget, and then the city council looks at it and plays with it a bit. At the state, the governor and their minions do that. Maybe appropriations has a little impact, but the general elected person in Pierre does not build a budget. They play with it, they massage it, and that's what they do. I remember one of our legislators, I think it was Christy Fegan, said, well, I deal with $1 billion budget. I would be interested in having the two former city councilors compare how the city budget is put together and done and how the county budget is put together and done, because they are different, and I'd like to hear their discussion. And that's just my comment, because I'm always of the opinion that the county builds each year a budget. The commissioners play with it, do it, work at it. The city councilors, they get one, they look it over, do a few little pencil marks, and they either approve it or not approve it, but by and large, they approve it. That's all I have to say. Oh, one thing I'll give you a little hint that might be worth paying attention to. If you get a bug bite, if you put on, you know, the liquid bandage on it, it doesn't itch quite so much.
Thank
Good
you.
advice.
Yep. We need all the advice we can get. All right, Commissioner Heiberger.
One more comment. I talked to Carol a little bit. In the years past, we've talked about it and never actually done it, is to send letters to all of our Minnehaha County legislators and just just a note or an email before budget season, about a month or two out, and say, this is when our budget dates are set, and invite them to come. We've talked about it, and I said it just needs to get on our list. And the other thing is, as Carol and I were talking about it, she suggested possibly when this is done, that we just write up a little cheat sheet note, send them off. They can be emailed or mailed to them, and tell them what's going on in Minnehaha County and how our budgets went. I did have one legislator reach out to me that tried to come last Tuesday and today, and because of work issues was unable to make either day. But at least one person was trying, and I think it is important for us to continue to try to educate them going forward. So I think it needs to be on our list of things to do for next year.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner
I'd
Barth.
jump on what Cindy just said, because I know that we mentioned it, and the Argus Leader printed it actually to come to our meetings and help us. And the only one we got, honestly, who is not being paid to be here is Bob. And I do appreciate that. And, you know, I just don't want to have a bunch of people show up at a later date and say, well, why did this happen? Please come. Please come to our meetings and help us make decisions. And if we're not necessarily going to agree with you, you're not necessarily going to agree with us, but don't come next January and tell us, where we were wrong.
So very good points. Anything else? Right. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming this morning. We really appreciate your input.